Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna stop.
Welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of June 22nd. And as I noted at the top of the show, I'm just back from El Paso, Texas, where for 22 of the last 24 years, I've gone to basketball in the barrio. And one of the ongoing regular attendees, coaches, is our next guest, the one and only Deb Weinreis. Good morning to you, or good afternoon, wherever you are.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, it was good to see you again at camp. And, you always have been really impressive to me. Not only are you a woman of both physical and mental stature, but you're a hell of a basketball player, and you've been a good counselor and coach for the kids in the camp. And I thought with the attention that women in sports are getting these days, it would be great to get you on record with your little bit of your own history and your take on the game and things in general. So why don't you start off by telling us your little bit of your sports history?
Thanks. So I was very fortunate to be a product of Title IX. In 72, when that was brought in, we could suddenly, women athletes could have opportunity for sport. I grew up in Hopkins, Minnesota, the same hometown as Paige Beckers, and we suddenly could play a lot of different sports. So from there, I was recruited to the University of New Mexico. I have an identical twin, and we were both recruited. So we played there. And then I transferred to San Diego. My twin transferred to Kansas State. And then we were fortunate enough, there was no pro league in the U.S. at the time. We both went overseas. I spent 15 years playing professionally and coaching in Norway and Switzerland. And my twin made her debut via London, Sweden, and finishing in Australia, and then also Munich. And so sports provided for us an opportunity to travel. It wasn't the big money. It was just an opportunity to live in Europe, meet people, learn languages. It was during the Cold War, so traveling through Poland or Czechoslovakia, and when it was occupied, gave us some life lessons, and then being there when the wall came down. So, it was a great place to be in your 20s.
Oh, that is good. I had the honor of, our friend Russ Bradford, who runs the camp that we both were just at, basketball in the barrio. When he was coaching in Ireland with a pro team, I went over there, and I became aware of a number of, I think in Ireland, only 2 Americans on each team were allowed, but it was the introduction to me about the number of ball players from the States who end up going to Europe to play. And you sound like you had a good time over there. What was the highlight of your career in basketball overseas?
Well, I guess some travel to live, and I live to travel. So the opportunity to go throughout Europe, riding the trains, my twin and I would meet and go down to the south of Spain or Greece. But it also, part of our contract always was to develop basketball for the young people in the clubs. So we were always involved that way as well. I was the only paid player at the time on my team in Oslo. They didn't have a professional league. My teammates all worked regular jobs. So there was a little different expectation. And I always had another job in addition to coaching the young ones. So, and we only practiced 3 times a week.
Hey, do you ever play against your sister?
Just in the driveway.
And
we were both at New Mexico, so we would, she was center, I was forward, so inter-squad scrimmage type things. But she's been in Australia now. She never came back. She had a 2-year contract in Brisbane, and it's been 32 years, and now she's actually has dual citizenship. So.
Well, one of the things that I know about you is that you were involved in Minnesota with the recreation and parks, I think in Minneapolis, Twin Cities. Tell us a little bit about that and the kind of work you've done and how meaningful that has been.
So Minnesota Recreation and Park Association provides training and education for park and rec professionals throughout the state. We have over 980 members, mostly city, but these training education opportunities we provide, whether it's playground safety or administration, programming, aquatics. I also was working with the state softball program, and then I started pickleball 15 years ago, back when nobody had heard about it. And so I was running also volleyball, basketball state tournaments as well. So it's kind of a combination of services that we as a nonprofit provided. And then I just actually retired March 4th. So I'm still kind of getting used to that. And that's why I was able to make it down to the barrio and see you.
Pickleball. You know, I went to my 50th high school reunion a few years ago, and I was invited down to the beach in my hometown to play pickleball by a classmate. And she said, come and check it out. And I got on the court, and a minute later, I kind of pulled my hamstring. But I've been noticing that I walked the track at my YMCA up in Evanston, Illinois, the McGaw Y. And there are now, like, sometimes in the morning, there are like 6 courts of pickleball. And it's really taken off. Why don't you give us a little bit your take on pickleball, since you were an early advocate of the game?
Yeah, we had snowbirds coming up from Arizona, returning to Minnesota, and we didn't really have courts. We were taping down the tennis courts, and they were a very vocal group because they were in these huge communities in Florida, Arizona, where they saw how popular it was. And so initially our city councils and board were like, pickleball. I mean, it's unfortunate the name doesn't do it justice, but
great. I don't know how they got that name.
It was from a poodle named Pickles in Washington with the guy that invented the game. But they didn't take it really serious, and then it just exploded. We have courts permanently dedicated throughout the Twin Cities and throughout the state, and they're popping up pint and paddles and mega shot, lucky shots. We have all these dedicated facilities that now also include restaurants and bars. So it's a real social niche for, initially it was the 55 plus community, but it's just taken off for all ages. And so we're seeing it grow.
I'm seeing it on TV too sometimes. Around trying to find some news or sports, and there it is, pickleball now, pickleball tournament. Well, let's go back to basketball a little bit. Our friend Russ Bradford reminded me of what I knew, that in Iowa, they used to have, the women weren't permitted to really play full court basketball. It was kind of a half court game. You had defensive people, offensive people, only 3 players. And, I'm just wondering how the game has really changed. I mean, there was a time when they didn't have a women's marathon in the Olympics. Women weren't capable, supposedly. And that might have been what was going on with Iowa basketball. But now we have, the advent of this real serious, the WNBA basketball going on. It's in the news. People are talking about women in sports. How have you seen the game evolve over the time that you've been with it?
Well, I think the biggest draw is that the women are so athletic. It's really a fun, team-oriented style of play, of working together. It's kind of like you create opportunities for your teammates to set them up. And I think that it's really been obvious on the women's side. And when you watch it, if you hadn't watched it for many years, you're very surprised at how high the level is. And the WNBA is just unbelievable. And then the quality of coaching opportunity. Of course, Caitlin Clark has come in, and so people have tuned in. And then obviously there's money. So marketing, sponsorships are helping promote the sport as well.
Another thing that you and I talked about a little bit, I don't know how much you want to get into it, but gender issues in sport. And in women's sports in particular, you want to talk a little bit about any of that? Like, I know you talked about there was a time when there were a lot of male coaches and they were hitting on women. And then there were other times when gay women were not permitted to at least be vocal or out front about that. Share some things about that, because I think it's an issue that's kind of happening these days. The LGBTQ thing is an issue on both sides of the political spectrum. It definitely has so we have the whole trans issue in sports, and it's a little overwhelming. But you've been around it all, and maybe could share with some of that with our viewers and listeners.
Sure. So in the late 70s, it wasn't discussed or talked. You didn't talk about anything like that. It wasn't in the open. And then working a lot of these camps and clinics when there were male coaches, if they were hitting on the female coaches that were working and they were rejected with their advances, they automatically assumed you were lesbian. And so some of the people that were running the camps were very concerned about the reputation with their name attached. And so they would either dismiss some of us or people that, whether it was true or not, it didn't matter. It was just that it was out there. And I think today people probably are very surprised that stuff like that was going on, because we're so different with how we address diversity. We still have a long way to go, of course, but compared to growing up, back then, it's really changed, and it's a little bit more open. So that's been a good thing.
How did people handle that? Like when you get hit on by coaches?
Well, I mean, when you're an 18 to 22-year-old, you're not really sure what to do with that attention. So, I mean, I know now. It's taken a few years. But back then, I mean, you just kind of didn't know what to say, and you didn't know who to go to if it happened.
I'm remembering that movie Personal Best, which there's a track woman, and the coach they have a love affair, but it was an example of it came to mind anyhow, women being hit on by their coach.
Yeah, Muriel Hemingway. Classic.
I liked that movie, but some people didn't like it. What's your take on Brittany Grenier and her situation and her ability, both as a basketball player and as a representative of the sport, and her own the little crisis that she had to go through? Yeah,
that's a tough goal. I mean, everybody pulled back on going, of course, to Russia, but also some other countries too, and that's where they're still not, they have to supplement their income by going overseas because of the short season with the WNBA. And with Brittany, it was a political pawn, obviously. And so I don't know if she could ever fully, there was a lot going on at that time. And so it's just little steps now getting back into it. But there's also a lot of attention on these athletes. And you think of Caitlin Clark as a 22-year-old with all these, big money sponsors coming at her, and first year in the WNBA, and the expectations. There's been a lot for her to absorb. So
yeah, and apparently there's been a lot of stories lately about people. I would call them conservatives, kind of right-wing people, but trying to play the race card around a number of things. And she initially was kind of quiet about it, but in the last few days came out and was very strong about, race and sports and playing with her sisters, that kind of thing. What's your sense of her and that issue?
Well, I think it's in the spotlight and people are talking about it, and hopefully it'll play out well.
Well, okay, that was good. I hope it plays out well too. She did beat the Chicago Sky 2 times. The Indianapolis team has beat our favorite women's team. And I don't know if that'll continue. I don't know if they're really a better team or not, but there is this little rivalry that goes back to the NCAA 2A, playoffs last couple of years.
I'll follow the links. Cheryl Reeve is a U.S. Olympic coach, so we're very, very proud of that.
Let's talk about coaches a little bit. How about that women's coach down in South Carolina? She's
Dawn Staley?
Yeah.
Oh, she's fantastic. Great player, great person, great advocate. She would be fantastic to play for, and nothing but good things to say. She was actually here in the Twin Cities about 3 weeks ago, talking about just how sports have evolved and her role. And she was really, really good. So fun to listen to her talk about her history.
Well, one of the things that's been going on for a lot of years is, people talking about college players, basketball, football, et cetera. Most women now, too, with basketball, not getting paid, but making money for the universities. And now we have a new thing, which the Supreme Court had a decision, and it's called, let me see if I get it right, name, image, and likeness, NIL. And someone who played probably not for very much money and had to keep it going for a number of years before bigger money came into the sport on the women's side. What's your take on NIL in general and how you think it might affect women?
Well, I think it's tough for teams in terms of cohesion. And when someone's making this and someone's making that and you're not making, I just know that when I was playing, my teammates were not paid. I was paid in the end by points, wins, either as a coach or a player. I was a player coach as well. And so I was dependent for my salary for performance, but I needed my team. So when they started bringing in that in the contract, that's when I had to step back because it was not working in my world. So I think it'll be interesting as these contracts play out because some of them are pretty impressive with the numbers.
Yeah, I just saw in the news, I think yesterday, well, we're recording this on a Tuesday and it's going to be aired starting on Friday, the 21st and then the 22nd and on. The standout at the University of Illinois on the men's side, a guy named Coleman Hawkins, who is, I don't know if he's related to or whatever, but there was a famed jazz man named Coleman Hawkins. He is transferring to Kansas State, I believe, and he's getting $2 million. And now how does that money come to someone like that? It's not true. They don't pay him directly, but it's through their image, their likeness, their use in games. How does that work?
I honestly, I'm not that familiar. I haven't been following it as much. I'm just kind of sad that it's been introduced.
You mean that the players get some money, or that?
Well, I think they should get something. I mean, they're making the universities big money. I understand the concept. I just don't know if that's the reason people should be always playing. I think sports offers opportunities for lots of things, but once you bring in that kind of money, it changes the dynamics for players and also for pressure that these kids are having growing up and their parents thinking they're going to make this big time money.
Deb, are you in contact with other coaches these days and people who are recruiting players? So, our friend Russ Bradford, he always was an observer of talent and he put out a newsletter. And I'm wondering if you, with your, being so involved in the parks and recreation up in Minnesota, you obviously know who's coming up in the scene, who's performing one way or another. How do you share that? Do you talk to people about it? Are you think it might be something that you'll keep doing?
I think the biggest involvement I had was when I was officiating, and I also just stepped back from that after 22 years, collegiate and high school. So I was seeing the college coaches in the stands. I knew who was around. You could see the top athletes, and right now, since 2020, I've really stepped back from that involvement. But definitely Gino and seeing him with Paige. I mean, he started looking at her when she was in 8th grade. So.
Oh, so you were a teammate of hers?
No, I was officiating.
Well, what do you got as a recommendation to young athletes, whether they be men or women?
Have fun. Make the most of it. I mean, it's not everyone's going to be a pro, and just enjoy your teammates and the people around you.
And as a now newly retired person, do you have what's on your bucket list these days besides
I'm going
back to basketball in the barrio?
Back to travel.
Where are you going to go?
Well, actually, after talking to Russ, I'm going to check out Ireland.
Yeah, he's over there this summer and he's working on a new book.
He just flew there yesterday.
I hope I see you before next June when we go back to basketball in the barrio number 33. But if not, you have a great time. And I want to thank you for coming on live from the Heartland, and we'll stay in touch. I got your new email.
Okay. Thank you.
Adios.
Adios.